All right. All right. Today is, oh goodness, it's July 20th. Time is 6:38 p.m. And I'll call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting to order. Second item, actually, I'm going to go back to one, call to order and introductions. And I just want to say welcome again to Michael, who has transitioned from being our temporary town planner to our actual town planner. We now have a contract with him to be our town planner. So we're no longer in
limbo.
Limbo.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
That
you.
was the word. So
Happy to be here.
welcome. Second item, review the minutes from our May 18th, 2023 meeting. Do we have a motion on those minutes?
Sure, I move to approve the minutes as is.
Right? Second, moved and seconded. Any discussion, corrections, punctuation errors, comments, suggestions? Seeing none, all in favor? That passes 4. No. Jeff, unless you have a comment from, we have no public, so we have no public comments. So we'll move right into new business. So we don't have any applications tonight, and we haven't had applications for the last couple months. And I actually wanted to maybe preface the discussions real quick with a little conversation about that, because there's a couple ways you could look at it. And I kind of want to take a minute and maybe like pat ourselves on the back, not us specifically, but the town, which is to say that one of the major goals of the core zoning code was to shift the majority of the burden of reviewing permit applications off the planning board and onto the CEO and the planner. And so from one perspective, I want to just take a minute and say, I think we've done that really well. And I think the code is actually doing what it should be doing. I know George is really busy, and I know he's reviewing a lot of permits, and we're not. And that's kind of awesome. We don't need to see every little tiny thing. So on the other hand, the flip side of that coin is we don't really know exactly what's going on, and that's okay. He does. He's the enforcer. That's his job. And Michael does, because Michael talks to George. The other side of that, I guess it's a 3-pointed stool now, is that perhaps we're not maybe capturing the type of development that could come to Newcastle that would need to be reviewed by the planning board. Does that make sense?
They don't appear to be applying and getting something off.
Yeah, or they're not doing the projects on the bigger scale, or the, you know what I mean, things that by necessity would have to come to the planning board. And maybe that's not a horrible thing, but it leaves room, I think, for a question like, what are the types of things that come to the planning board, permanent applications that come to the planning board that we wish we saw more often? You know what I mean? The types of development that the core zoning code was aimed at, promoting the type of development that we wanted in certain areas of town that we would have to review. And if we're not getting that stuff, it's not necessarily a question for us, but it's a question for the town, right?
Do we have any evidence that those sorts of projects are happening in other towns? And it's not just that they aren't happening in Mid-Coast Maine because of, I don't know, the economy or something. Are they happening elsewhere and not here because of our code, or are they just not happening?
I don't know if it's about my code, and I'll have Michael speak to this in a second, but I talked to a lot of people that work in Southern Maine, and Southern Maine is basically on fire for development. It's a madhouse, and it has been for a while, and that's no secret. Do we want that kind of firestorm here? No, but would we like a little bit of it? Yes. So that's a good question, but I don't know. Do you know any neighboring towns are getting more development than we're getting of the type that we would like to see?
No, I don't think construction in Mid-Coast is certainly not comparable to Southern. I do know, like Damariscotta had 2 projects that were approved within the last year. One was a assisted living nursing home and one was a apartment. It's supposed to be affordable housing, 55 plus, but whether they get built, because they have not started, I don't think they've pulled permits. So they did go to the planning board and they did get approved. So like someone obviously was pursuing that, but whether it's actually feasible construction wise, I don't know. The other part of this is, I don't know. There's obviously a lot of development going on in southern Maine, so I couldn't possibly have seen all of it, but there's quantity and there's quality, and they've clearly got the quantity in southern Maine. There are a lot of things that, not that all the projects are bad, but there are a lot of not great kind of sprawly development that I don't think that the board or most residents of Newcastle would want to attract. I should say, I met with a property owner in the fabrication district that's looking to do 12 plus units there, mixed use. So there's some interest. That seems pretty reasonable, like pretty feasible as far as actual development. Just trying to think, like, so there's conversations that are going on that I think that at least I've been a part of, that seem like they have potential. Hopefully they actually come forward and are good projects. But I think Newcastle is also a little bit overlooked in terms of, Damascotta is the shiny thing that all the developers go to, but they're not booming in terms of construction. Certainly not multifamily or mixed use or commercial or anything like that right now. So, sometimes I know the market is not great, like the construction costs and rents, everything are not, it's not like construction costs are low and demand and rents are really high. So I imagine Newcastle's being overlooked a little bit, but some of it is also just like, it's difficult right now to be building in mid-coast and probably everywhere. So that's kind of my perspective on it. Have been trying to talk to, developers or anybody saying, at least housing, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody wants some housing. So, I don't think that we're being overlooked necessarily, or I do think we're being overlooked, but I don't think it's specifically Newcastle
Or because of our code.
or because of the code. Yeah. I think the code, if anything, it would be attractive if developers were looking.
So, you mentioned housing, and I think that's one of the big things right now that like literally every town is trying to figure out how to produce or how to attract or how to build more housing out of either what they got or find someone to build more and more affordable housing. And since everybody is doing that, every town is doing that, how does a town stand out of that crowd and distinguish itself and look really attractive in terms of getting even the consideration? And I think there's a couple cards we have yet to play. The big one is, the big conversation around establishing a TIF district or some kind of TIF program to, specifically to attract the kind of development that we want in the areas of mixed use, multi-unit commercial, and multi-unit residential specifically.
Well, and I would like to make a distinction between TIFs and the credit enhancement agreements,
right?
Which go along with TIFs but are not TIFs,
right?
Because they both have their place. Credit enhancement agreements tend to attract much more scrutiny, and they can be bad if they're not done right. But TIFs typically, like, they usually are not as attractive to developers because you don't really give anything back to them. But they can have their place because we can be like, oh, we're going to spend money on X, Y, and Z and really provide some indirect benefit.
Right.
So both of, but I just wanted to clarify that. for
Yeah.
Just the general thought.
Right. I guess the question that I have is we've talked or mentioned the idea of TIFs for a while and we haven't really done it. So I'm wondering if we should maybe ask you to come with a recommendation next month about getting the ball rolling. You know, give us some basic education, about a path forward and what you think the low hanging fruit might be. And then I think, you know, in order to do it, we have to run it up the flagpole. Obviously, it has to be approved by the select board and then also by the town. So we can't do it ourselves, but I think if it came from us, if it was something we decided we wanted to do, it would carry a little bit of weight and it'd be another piece of fruit in the basket that might start looking enticing. What do you guys think?
It never hurts to get more information. I think that would be helpful.
Definitely do that. I yeah. Pull something together probably for the next meeting.
You think so?
Just like a general overview, at least of TIF, credit enhancement agreement.
Yeah.
Make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And where at least I think that it could be applicable.
Great.
Obviously, your all of your 2 cents would be important as far
So-
as where you want to apply it.
Yeah. So the second part of that is that there's rumblings that we're going to reform the housing committee, or at least bring it back. It met last year, most of the year, and kind of went fallow for whatever reason. But that might be a good invite to pass along and just have them come to that meeting as well. If they're going to kick off and really focus on trying to do something about housing, make recommendations, they should know too.
So is there a housing committee?
There was. It was 5 members. I can get you the names.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if it needs to be reformed, are there members, or
It
does
was
it need to be kind of constituted?
it should be reconstituted at this point. It was actually an ad hoc committee of the Board of Selectmen. But it should probably be a subcommittee of this.
Possibility of having a select board member on it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that way they're involved.
Tor was on it before. They'd do it again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to consider with housing, and it's an issue, and you can already see, I mean, I hear, you know, residents talking about it, just the impacts of, not just here, but anywhere, like people are having a hard time hiring people to do the work because they can't find anyone to work. People, they'll find someone who's like, yeah, sure, you know, they get hired and then they say, they come, they look for a house, nothing.
Right.
Not a pass.
Yep.
So.
Bad situation.
Yeah.
And Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission did last month release their housing report. That has a lot of really good data in it about Lincoln County housing. Stuff I think we all know, but I think, you know, having the housing committee reform around, you know, chewing on that, have them meet with us and kind of turn them loose and say, come back with some good recommendations.
Yeah.
Every town is doing this. We have to sort of play ball, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I want to say, like, potential, a lot of talent and capacity locally and nearby to actually build and develop housing. So it's not like we need to be like trying to attract a, you know, like a Portland or Boston based developer to come. Like, I think we could probably get something going that is even smaller scale, maybe one off, you know, and just do kind of the death by 1,000 paper cuts, like get infill, have somebody put an ADU up, like all of those
Mhm.
do though, and that a lot of times is might just be encouraging or informing kind of the public,
Mm.
saying like, oh, that, space above your garage, here's, you're allowed to do it, just needs a little kind of like encouragement, not so much of like clearing the way
Right.
or funding. It's just inform.
So, I mean, that is, I think, the biggest hurdle that Newcastle faces in terms of zoning code, which is a lot of other towns are struggling with, the primary recommendation when it comes to how do we create more affordable housing, is change your zoning. That's the number one. Change your zoning to allow more housing. Well, we already did all that years ago now, and we've been open for business, but the business really hasn't come. And so how do we get that word out? You know what I mean? Like we have much greater density capacity, infill capacity, and much less strict regulations about where and how you can build housing that would make a difference in this town than all of our neighboring towns. Not just like our close neighbors, but like all of our neighboring towns. Pretty easy. So I don't know. I think about that a lot, but I don't know how to address it.
And then within the context of construction costs, rents, just like the economy, makes it that much harder. So
All right.
I don't think there is a one solution.
There isn't. I think it's got to be like you throw everything at the problem, everything you can think.
And we have sewer and water, which a lot of neighboring towns don't, because you can get a lot more dense with that. And I don't mean, I'm not talking towers, I'm just talking more than 2 units.
Right. So, right. All right. So I'll stop beating that dead horse. So priorities, and this is the reason we wanted to actually meet, was now that we have Michael on board. We wanted to just sort of put him to work on things that need doing. So this list I developed last year when the planning board met to discuss, when the select board met to discuss their goals. I was asked as a planning board chair to come up with what the planning board work list goals are. So I came up with this last year when we had our previous town planner, or right before we got, I can't remember. Anyway, this is what I came up with. For better or worse, complete or not complete, this is what I wrote down. And I thought this could be a starting point for us to have a conversation about where to point Michael and direct his efforts when he's not, talking with potential applicants or reviewing permit applications, doing any of the administrative stuff. What do we need? What's highest on the priority list? And I know I'm just dropping this on your lap right now.
Yeah, and I haven't compared it to this list that I had from probably close to the new year. Before I was even acting town planner. But I know, some of the comprehensive plan with new census data, COVID property transfer data, schools, etc. I know I updated it through the end of 2022, I guess.
Oh, okay. You did.
Because that's what was submitted to, we submitted it to the state in January.
And we still haven't heard back at all.
I have not assumed that. So hopefully we'll hear back from them soon. But so there were updates in that already. I think if they approve it, we might want to leave it for a little bit. Yeah.
It's time, right? It's almost 10 years.
That and shoreline zoning, I can give you an update on right now. George was in touch with the state, DEP, and they essentially gave us a conditional approval of our shoreline zoning ordinance. They identified a number of things that were not in there that need to be in there that we are going to have to enforce. And they basically said what they approved, we can and need to enforce that, plus all of anything that they identified that was missing. So we've kind of got these two documents now. I'm in the process of trying to push them together so that we can resubmit to the state, hopefully get it approved and just have one document. So that will need to go. It would be an ordinance update, so it would have to go to town meeting. But at least we're making progress on that. I think it was like a week or two ago that I heard from the state, and they gave us that conditional supplemental approval, whatever it was.
So we workshopped chapter 1000 last summer. And I don't think I've ever given you my notes.
I don't, if you did, I do not.
I don't think you have them.
Yeah.
So I'll give you those.
Okay. That'd be great.
Because if we can just do it once and be done, that'd be great.
I think that should be.
The biggest problem and where we kind of got to it was, well, all right, we talked about all the different options and things that we could choose from and identify and whatnot. And then we realized the map has to be redrawn. And we kind of went, well, crap. Yeah, that map needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from 09. And there's been, I think, 2 or 3 subsequent greater mappings of the area and the shoreline, everything like that.
Yeah.
And so we have access to very accurate data. I think LiDAR up to like 6-inch resolution, and the map that we're currently using is all bubbles. I think the max resolution was like, I can't even remember, 10 meter or something. It was awful. It was really bad.
Right. Well, yeah, I imagine some of the districts are going to move, but it's basically anything within 250 feet of water, not
Yeah.
beyond that.
Right.
But where we're talking residential versus like commercial makes sense, but especially because like the downtown village area is all basically within 250 feet of water. So where we draw those lines could be important.
So we haven't had the conversation about the maps and the districts and if the districts need to, be changed, modified, updated. I had one resident ask about the Shoreland Maritime District, because as it is right now, our Maritime Activities District is locked to the boatyard parcel, and that is it. We do not allow maritime activities on any other part of our section of the river at all. And why that decision was made so long ago, I don't even want to get into it. It doesn't matter, but it does seem a little ridiculous that if somebody else wanted to start a boatyard, they couldn't.
Or any other.
Or any other maritime activity. They couldn't. Shoreland would shut them down.
Yeah.
So,
which especially with, I don't know when those districts would have been drawn, but just the shellfish farming business seems to have grown
all the
significantly. So
huge.
Yeah.
So just so you know, I think when we get to that point, make your edits, do all that stuff. We need to get a cartographer involved.
Yeah.
Redo the stuff and the GIS and everything. And then we need to have the conversation about the districts and whether or not they should change before we put it to the voters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm right now just trying to put everything that's, I guess, required. There probably will be some, if you've got notes or anybody here has comments and notes, we can update it, but I think at least getting everything that needs to be in there in one place. Cool.
So I had put update the core zoning code, demolition of historic and non-historic structures. That's something that is gonna actually, it's in flux because there is a historic preservation, sorry, I didn't get to talk to you about it earlier, but there's an historic preservation ordinance committee that is currently working on proposing an ordinance for historic preservation. And it will include demolition of historic assets in it. But the question was raised whether or not the core zoning code needed to include any language at all, because it currently doesn't, about demolition of non-historic structures or assets or just demolition in general. Reason being, we had a couple of people come in and say, hey, do I need to get a permit for this? And we looked and said, no. And they just basically took an excavator and pushed the house into the foundation and covered it with dirt. And I went, I think we need to come up with some rules around this.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from on that one.
Yeah.
It'd be good to have.
Push any cars into the basement before.
Don't know if they unloaded the oil tank, don't know, don't know. Literally just pushed it in. So.
Yeah, and I can say, if anybody does call and ask, I can't say, it's like, I have to be like, no, we don't have an ordinance that stops you from doing that. And please don't.
Please don't. Please be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just talking beyond the demolition of historic, just
Demolition.
outside of.
Yeah.
So you have to have a permit before you start any significant excavation activities. But if all you're doing is knocking the house down, you don't have to have a permit.
Yeah, the
But
way.
you have to have a permit if they're gonna dig a hole,
Yeah,
as long as they're not digging anything.
right. Yeah, so it's kind of like, if you need a permit, to build something new that doesn't exist.
Even just to dig a hole. Right?
Yeah, well,
I mean, if you bring an excavator on, and start digging, that's.
Yeah, I think
isn't that
the
right?
ordinance does say something about like, you need permission to do anything, but then demo's not regulated.
If what
So
you're
it's
doing is
like,
demo.
we basically are like, you need to ask permission, but we can't say no.
There's-
Yeah.
Well, minor oversight.
a little bit. I mean, there are regulations, both the DEP and the EPA have regulations about, shingles are, even, asphalt shingles are considered hazardous waste. And you are supposed to take them off, declare them, take them to the transfer station, weigh them, pay the fee.
Not supposed to just
And
pile
dispose
them
of
out on the back,
You're not supposed to dig a hole and put them in the backyard. That's not what
or
this
just
is.
pile them in the woods somewhere.
Yeah, just throw them. So, I mean, that's, a small part of demolition, but it's a common.
Yeah, I mean, if someone causes contaminates soil or creates a hazard, like, they're responsible for it, but they may not know.
They may not know. And it may be
We-
50 years until someone figures it out,
Right.
and then they're gone.
Yeah.
You can't go back and get them after 50 years.
Is there a process in Damascata for this or like Bristol, other towns? You know what they do in terms of demolition?
It's actually surprisingly not common to have demo like permits or regulations, because it's like everything's legal until you make it not legal. So unless they address it. So you can imagine, like, there's plenty of municipalities that are very hands off. They don't even have land use ordinances, so they aren't approaching demo. But it is a good thing to consider.
Right, you don't perceive it as an issue until somebody does something. Wow, wait, what? You did what?
That's exactly
Oh.
what happened. I was a little shocked. I mean, I got the call and I looked into it, and this is before it, it was a while ago. I said, yeah, we don't have anything that regulates demolition. okay, great, thanks. I don't have to get a permit fee or nothing. It's like, guess not. And next thing I know, I drove past and the excavator was just pushing it right into the foundation. And next day I drove back and it was just dirt. And I was like, oh, this is not cool. I thought, you know, in my naive
gonna-
brain, they were gonna like
haul it
get a
away.
dumpster, chew it up, put it in the dumpster, haul it away. No.
There's already a hole.
It's
Right.
pre-made landfill. So, I mean, at the very least, it'd be nice to have a sentence that says you can't use your foundation as a landfill. Like,
Right.
that's not okay. Like,
Yeah, what do we, what district are you allowed to build a landfill?
I don't think you are. Actually, I'm, so this is one of those
And how do you
things where
define
it's like,
landfill?
how do you define landfill, right? Towns, the state took away the ability a while ago for towns to have their own
Yeah. if they're
landfills,
stations.
right?
So if you're not allowed to have one, then there's no need to list to define what it is. Well, or you really need to define what it is.
So that's the question, right?
Yeah, you know, it doesn't show up in definitions.
You've got junk salvage yard. Not really the same.
I didn't intend to use it again. It's not salvage.
Right.
Anyway, that's one on the list. We should look at, but probably honestly, of all the things under the update section. That have recently risen in my mind to the level of this needs to be dealt with like right now is short-term rentals. And I'd like to make the suggestion that we move on changing our ordinance in the regulation of short-term rentals as quickly as possible. We had workshopped a little bit of this stuff, and I think I shared some of the concepts that I'd come up with at one point. Haven't shown them to Michael yet. I think I even wrote some language, but the short-term rental situation is eating our town up, and every other town up in their housing market, you know, our housing market. And there are cities and towns who are actively pushing back against short-term rentals and regulating around short-term rentals. Portland is
Yeah.
spearheading a lot of it at the moment.
Yeah. I think there's a number of ways with like the owner occupied.
Yeah.
I think I may have discussed with you a little bit, but it would be great if we could somehow use the demand for short-term rentals to encourage more long-term rental housing.
Yeah.
So if you were to say like you can only rent half, every other unit short-term rental, or 30% of your livable area short-term rental or something like that. So that it would be like, okay, if you want a short-term, that lucrative thing, build another dwelling unit. You can rent one short-term and rent one long-term.
Right. Yes.
So I don't know if that's
Yes.
how much potential there is.
Well, I think fleshing out what we have now, we have a permit process which largely gets ignored. That's not good. And it's a complicated issue. Unfortunately, I feel like in order to apply good standards that are equitable across the districts, it's not a simple standard to write. It's a multi-leveled set of standards. You know what I mean? Where we actually look at each of the districts and have the conversation with what is an appropriate short-term rental use in this district versus this district versus this district. And because I think they look different, and they're being used differently. They're being abused differently in different areas, and we should respond accordingly. Does that make sense? I don't want to, I don't, I want to say outright, and for anyone that might be listening, I am not interested in killing short-term rentals, but short-term rentals are killing us. Because there's nowhere to long-term rent. And there's a lot of houses that have just come off, where people would be living. And now no one's living for 6 months or 7 months out of the year. And they're only being, Airbnb'd or Verba for, 4 or 5 months. And that's all they need to do because you make a killing for those 4 or 5 months and then you shut the house down and you don't have to worry about it.
And drives up the price, the amount of money that you can be making short-term renting a house. The amount that you can then spend to buy a house, that you can justify buying a house, is much more than what most houses were reasonably going for pre-pandemic.
So what, and here, I will give you the example and I won't tell you exactly where, but they're in a neighboring town. I was standing on a road. This is the river and this is the other side of the road that's not on the river, but you have a view of the river, no access to the river, but you have a view of the river. And I was standing with someone, turned around and said, you know how much that Airbnb is for a week? And I said, no, how much? $7,000. Just a view. $7,000. And I went, oh. And that's when it hit me. I realized, like,
It's a
we're
big-
done.
Big house.
No.
Is this somewhere in Lincoln County?
Yes. Yes. And he goes, I mean, I almost fell over. I was like weak kneed. And then he goes, that one's 4,000 a month. He's just down the road. That one's 5,000 a month. He's just pointing. And I'm realizing no one lives in this. They're investment properties. And that's killing them. And it's gonna kill us. Because you're right. $7,000 a week. You can take that money and buy 3 more houses and do the exact same thing and just keep going. The money makes sense. And that is seriously contributing to the housing shortage problem we're having and the affordability problem. And we have to regulate it somehow. Sorry, we do. I don't want to tell people they can't make money, but there has to be some reasonable limits placed on it.
Yeah, because it can be very helpful to help people stay in their home, especially like the conversation used to be, people call them granny flats, ADUs anyway, and say like, okay, so you can stay in, you can generate extra income from you're above your garage, or you can move into above your garage if you're retired and rent out your, this is kind of also ADU. That's where a lot of that came from. But like to help you stay and generate income that helps you pay your mortgage or your taxes or whatever. So there's definitely benefit, but if it's just turning into luxury rentals for transient visitors, not great.
No. Anyway, so my personal, I don't want to hear from, I want to hear from the rest of you guys, but my personal belief is that's the tippy top of the list at the moment. Like, we should be bringing that to special town meeting, the very next special town meeting, as soon as possible.
Would this be an ordinance that we would craft as part of the code, or the town itself would craft and we would give input?
No, I think it'd be an update or a change, modification to the core zoning code, the language that we would suggest. And then it would have to be, go through public hearing and then voted on. I think, unless you think we need something new.
No, I just was curious.
Yeah. I don't think we need to workshop it with the community. I think the minute that we propose changes, we'll hear a lot of good and a lot of bad about it. So whether they're in favor of the changes or they're in favor of the restrictions or whatever the case may be, or the regulations. But at the end, I'm not going to mince words. At the end of the day, we're talking about placing restrictions on what is currently now unbounded short-term rental usage.
Yeah, I think it's certainly gonna capture attention of the public and I think we'll probably have never seen a planning board meeting like that when it comes, it's just my personal thought. There'll be a lot of people here.
Yep.
So, it's not gonna be one where there's no public comment, so
I agree.
I could be wrong, but
No, I agree.
I assume the process is, if the changes to the land use ordinance, planning board is going to review, make a recommendation to the select board. They're going to review, put it on the warrant, but both the planning board and the select board probably do they have to have public hearings? Or they have to have public hearings
Yes.
for both, right?
Yes. So what we've done in the past, and it's getting pretty common, is for the planning board to hold its public hearing on the ordinance separate, and then to have a joint planning board and select board public hearing, because you have to have one, 45 days before the vote, and then you have to have one within, I think, 2 weeks or something like that of the vote. So that's the one that we've been doing joint. And just, at that point, you call it a public hearing and you can't change anything. It's really an informational meeting. Hey, this is coming up on the warrant in a couple of weeks. Come vote, here's what's in it. Anyone have any questions? No, we can't make any changes, but the one prior to would be one, okay, here's the proposal, here's the language. Do we need to change anything?
Well, my understanding, public hearing is like the public is entitled to make comments and speak publicly. Which I say that because with all the planning board meetings, if they're public, like we've got public comment part, but some of that sometimes it's required.
Ben, do you have a, in terms of like an end date in mind? I mean, is this something that you'd want to have set up before the election in November, or whatever else is on the ballot, or?
Yeah, so the Historic Preservation Committee is looking to send their proposal, their ordinance proposal to us to hold a public hearing, and to the select board for a special town meeting in, I think, October, or it might be the end of September or early October. So it's like, if we want to do anything, we got to do it like right now. We basically got to have it ready to go next month. Okay. August, September. Yeah. So we'd have to, at our meeting next month, we'd have to have what we want, have been over it, and go over it at that point. And if we like it, prove it, put it into the queue. And we'd be able to have both of those items up for a vote, have a special vote at the same time. Instead of having to have multiple. Okay. So, and if that doesn't work, if it has to go to, I think the Historic Preservation Committee's idea was to not put ordinance changes on a referendum. It was to actually have it at an open town meeting where people can ask questions, and the committee or the board involved can actually explain or answer those questions, before the actual vote, instead of just coming and voting on a piece of paper and not really knowing what it is. Just like, do you want this? You don't know.
Discussion is good.
Discussion is good. Exactly. That's the idea.
And then, yeah, if that's all you get. A lot of the votes are gonna be,
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
right. Exactly. It seems more reasonable to have a conversation before people vote.
And they still don't know.
They may still vote no. Exactly. That's their prerogative.
Right.
So the rest of it, we can work on as we want to, review it, think about it. If anything pops up in your thinking or your experience or your conversation with other residents, send emails around and maybe something else will float to the top. But I don't want to overload Michael's time right off the bat, because if we're asking to do this and work on shoreland and, think about these other things that we've got going on, plus have all the conversations and help George, whatnot. That's enough for now. Yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to be able to give it the attention it deserves. So.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But that's not to say that the rest of this isn't unimportant. Some of it actually is very important. But it's just not as important right now. And some of it we've done. So, we adopted bylaw. Diego was.
Mhm.
All right. Do we have anything else we want to discuss or talk about? Michael, do you have anything that you wanted to talk about? Feel like I've said a lot. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, it's a sickness. It's a sickness. Think about this stuff all the time. It really is. All right. If we don't have any planners report, nothing to report at this time. We're
I
good.
got hired by the town.
You good job. Excellent. And you're working with Damascotta too, I should say, right?
Yes,
So
yeah, both.
let's just clarify. You're working for Damascotta, you're working for Newcastle.
Yes.
You're here 2 days a week for sure.
Yep.
And those days are,
So my schedule is, and I guess it could change, but this seems to be working right now. I am in Newcastle Tuesday and Thursday. And then Damascotta Monday and Wednesday. And Friday I kind of do a flex. It's not like hard, like I'm not allowed to think about Newcastle when I'm in Damascotta. So emails, phone calls, fine. I think what I was thinking was like open kind of office hours are those 2 days, but I'm thinking in the mornings and then, or as needed. So if someone, any of you or anybody from the public or anybody wants to meet about planning things, I'm happy to accommodate as a maybe.
Cool. Which I would encourage anyone who's thinking about doing a project to take advantage of. Because it's a huge help, which we already know. Having a lot of that conversation that doesn't need to happen at this meeting.
And I love talking about it because I have the same sickness.
And they don't make a pill for that yet. They're like, wow. Anyway, all right. So if there's no other business, and without objection, I will deem the meeting adjourned. The time is 7:26.